We will be discussing the following topics. The first topic is ISO 22000-2018 standard. The second topic is the summary of the technical standard, which is ISO 22002 Part 1 for food manufacturing. The next topic will be FSSC 22000 additional requirements. We will also be discussing customer requirements, and lastly, other relevant standards that are relevant to FSSC 22000. In this topic, we will be discussing ISO 22000 2018. ISO 22000-2018 is a newly revised international food safety standard designed to harmonize on a global scale the requirements for food safety management systems for businesses within the food chain. The first edition of the ISO 22000 standard was in 2005, and it was previously known as ISO 22000-2005, and it has been revised, and in 2018 the second edition was published, and it's known as ISO 22000-2018. ISO 22000 combines and supplements the core requirements of ISO 9001 and HACCP in order to provide an effective framework for the development, implementation, and continual improvement of a documented food safety management system. It is done within the context of the organization's overall business risks. ISO 22000 certification is intended for organizations seeking to establish a more focused, coherent, and integrated food safety management system than is normally required by law. The standard requires meeting any applicable food safety related statutory and regulatory criteria into its food safety management system. ISO 22000 is aimed at preventing food safety outbreaks and emphasizes the importance of managing food safety. ISO 22000-2018 also places a lot of emphasis on management systems, which include policies and procedures. It furthermore encourages a lot of communication within the organization. ISO 22000 has the advantage over the many private standards as it covers the whole organization. It contributes to ensure food safety hazards throughout the whole chain are controlled. This means that all food safety hazards from farm to table are controlled and ensure that there is no way that there could be any contaminants that could lead to food safety risk or public health risk in general. Now in this topic, let's look at the technical standards. In order for one to be certified for FSSC 22000 or to properly implement ISO 22000, they would need to ensure that they implement the technical standards, which are basically the GMP standards. There are 6 parts of the technical standards. The first one is the ISO Technical Standard 22002 Part 1 of 2009 pertaining to food manufacturing. So meaning that if you are in food manufacturing, you only have to use the technical standard as your GMP. Of course, you can use other supplementary standards or other regulatory GMP requirements, but for the purposes of FSSC 22000 certification, your GMP standard would be ISO 22002 Part 1 of 2009. Then Part 2 deals with catering, okay, which is the ISO 22002 Part 2 of 2013. Part 3 deals with4 and is known as ISO Technical Standard 22002 Part 3 of 2011. Part 4 deals with food packaging manufacturing, meaning that it is used to manufacture packaging used in the food industry. As we know, we cannot just use any packaging material except the one that is certified as food grade and is therefore permissible for use in the food industry. And that standard is known as ISO Technical Standard 22002, Part 4 of 2013. We also have Part 5 that is used for transport and storage, and that standard is known as ISO 22002, Part 5 of 2019. Then we have got Part 6 that is for feed and animal food production. It is known as ISO Technical Standard 22002, Part 6 of 2016. So those are the technical standards that are used in implementing the FSSC 22000. Remember, the technical standards are GMP standards and they cannot be used alone without the ISO 22000 2018 standard, which is the main standard and is the management system standard. Now, let's have a look at the scope of the scheme, FSSC 22000 scheme. The scheme is intended for the audit and certification of organizations for the food chain categories or subcategories as indicated on the table that is shown on the slide. And the noticeable difference here is that we no longer have category A. There were two subcategories previously. There was subcategory A1 and A2. So they have revised that so that it can align to the ISO 22003 Part 1 of 2022 that indicates the different categories or that shows the categories which the ISO 22000 standard is applicable to. So they've removed the farming category, so category 1, which is A1, farming of animals for meat, milk, eggs, honey, that has been completely removed, as well as a subcategory A2, which relates to the farming of fish and seafood. So all the farming categories or subcategories have been removed, which makes ISO 22002 Part 3 a redundant standard for FSSC 22000 scheme. So it's no longer a relevant standard for this scheme. Let's move to category B. Under category B, we now have B3 that relates to the pre-process handling of plant products. So this includes activities on harvested plants that do not transform the product from original whole form, including horticultural products and hydrophytes for food. These include cleaning, washing, rinsing, fluming, sorting, grading, trimming, bundling, cooling, hydrocooling, waxing, drenching, aeration, preparing for storage or processing, packaging, repacking, staging, storing, and loading. So the technical specification that is applicable here is the Part 1 of 2009. So if you have got any facility that handles product that belong under subcategory B, this will then be applicable to you. And then under subcategory, there is another category, category C. It's the biggest category since it has category C0 to C4. The biggest change here is perhaps the introduction of C0 that is applicable to products of animal origin where they have been converted, so the primary conversion of animal products. So this relates to the animal carcasses intended for further processing, including lairage, slaughter, evisceration, bulk chilling, bulk freezing, bulk storage of animals and game cutting, bulk freezing of fish and storage of game. And this one will be the technical specification ISO TS 22002 Part 1 of 2009. C1, not much has changed except that they have provided better clarity in terms of the processing of perishable animal products, and that they have also included processing of pet food from animal products only as part of the subcategory. And they have clarified better what perishable animal products mean, where they've said that it requiring chilled or frozen temperature control, so to make sure that there is no confusion. Under C2, they have introduced or better explained that the processing of perishable plant-based product is applicable to this subcategory. And again, also processing pet food from plant products only is applicable to this subcategory. Under C3, there has been a bit of introduction of things there and better clarity, as well as introduction of some of the facilities that were previously not cleared or explained better in the version 5.1 scheme documents. So here it looks at processing of perishable animal and plant products. So this means that it mixes both animal as well as plant. And they've included off-site catering kitchens, which was previously not included, including products of industrial kitchens not offered for immediate consumption, and also processing perishable pet food from mixed products. So you can see here that it does not necessarily relate to food service. Food service is still in place, but for those type of products where you prepare food and then you sell it perhaps to a restaurant or a retail store, it's packaged, nicely packaged, and then you sell it through to a retail store to sell on your behalf, then this is a category that you'll be certified against. Then we have got C4. C4 relates to the processing of ambient stable products. Here we are looking at also processing and packaging of products and stored and sold at ambient temperature, including canned foods, biscuits, snacks, etc., as well as processing ambient stable pet food. So you'll see that it doesn't matter whether the product is meant for animal consumption, as long as it's or pet food rather. So as long as it belongs to any one of these category, your product will belong to that category. So whether it's animal, it's pet food, or it's supposed to be consumed by humans, the categories will guide you. They are the same. So you would just need to determine which category is my pet food belonging to, or the food that I manufacture, and then it will be treated as the same. So in other words, the processing methodologies that we use for pet food and animal and human food is treated the same way by the scheme requirements. Let's look at Category D. Category D, a lot of changes there. So we no longer have pet food category, since it has been aligned with Category C for food manufacturing meant for human consumption. We only have got one category and subcategory, which is D, that is the processing of feed and animal food. It's very important to look at the differences between category D and C. D looks at feed, when you have got products that you manufacture to feed your chickens, to feed cattle. So that is animal feed. So you are producing something that you are going to feed animals that you are going to slaughter that are meant for human consumption. So that is what it relates to. So it could be the grains, it could be oil seeds, it could be anything really that is intended for food and non-food producing animals that are not kept in household. So as they've given example, meal from grain, oilseed byproducts of food production, and also it includes processing feed mixtures with or without additives intended for food producing animals. For example, the premixes, medical feed, compound feeds. And if you want to be certified for this, you'll then choose the ISO technical specification 22002 part 6 of 2016, as well as the applicable additional requirements. So we no longer have D2A, D2B, all that has gone out. They've removed that. Now let's look at category E, and it has only one subcategory, which is E, and this relates to catering or food service. So they've added that just for better clarity, that it includes open exposed food activities such as cooking, mixing, and blending preparation of components and products for on-site direct consumer consumption or takeaway. Examples include restaurants, hotels, food trucks, institutions, workplaces, which could relate to schools, factory, cafeteria, etc., including also retail with on-site preparation, including also reheating of food, event catering, coffee shops and pubs. And if you want to go for this one, you would then choose Part 2 of 2013. This is the applicable technical specification. And then Category F, very interesting introduction here, e-commerce. So F1, we have got e-commerce. That relates to the storage and provision of finished products to customers and consumers. It also includes minor processing activities, for example, slicing, portioning, reheating. And if you decide, or if you are in this industry, then we are going to choose the PSI PAS 221 of 2013, as well as the additional requirements. Interestingly, they've also included F2, which was previously not in place, but was in other standards such as your BRCGS, your IFS, the brokering, trading, or e-commerce. So this relates to buying and selling products on the company's own account without physical handling or as an agent for others of any item that enters the food chain. So, for example, in the citrus industry, we have got agents that sell citrus fruits overseas in Europe or on behalf of South African pack houses and farms, citrus farms. The same thing with palm fruit, stone fruit. There are many agents that sell on the behalf of those facilities. And now they can be certified for FSSC 22,000 under subcategory F2, and is the only subcategory that does not require any technical specification. So you can implement it by using the management system standard, which is the ISO 22000 2018, as well as the additional requirements. Then the next category is category G. So under category G, previously we had G, G1, and G2. That is no longer in place. We only have got G that relates to the transport and storage services. And if you choose, or if you are in this category, you will then go for the technical specification Part 5 of 2019 that relates to storage facilities and distribution vehicles for perishable food and feed where temperature integrity shall be maintained. It also includes storage facilities and distribution temperatures for ambient stable food and feed, as well as labeling or repackaging, excluding open exposed product materials, and also storage facilities and distribution vehicles for food packaging material. Then let's look at I. Not much has changed in I. It's still production of packaging material, just that they have better given example of included activities and products, that it includes production of packaging material in contact with food, feed and animal food. It may include packaging produced on site for use in processing. Category K, nothing much has changed there. It's just the grammar that has been corrected, that it includes production of bio or chemicals, and also production of food and feed processing aids, additives, gases, and minerals, as well as the production of biocultures and enzymes. So if you choose or if you are in this industry, then Part 1 of the ISO TS technical specification would be the GMP or PRP standard that you would use. So I think we have outlined everything here. It's important for one to really pay attention so that they choose the right category. Let's now have a discussion about the FSSC 22000 additional requirements. So previously we only had 15 additional requirements. That has been increased to 18 additional requirements, so 18. We are starting with 2.5.1, which is the management of services and purchase material. So this is applicable to all food chain categories. We are going to discuss in far more detail when we are looking at each additional requirement. So this one is mostly relating to the laboratory testing, making sure that the lab is accredited one way or the other. Either it is accredited to ISO 17025 or it is participating in proficiency testing. It also talks about emergency procurement procedures to ensure that products still conform to specified requirements and that the supplier has been evaluated. It goes on to talk about the policy for the procurement of animals, fish, and seafood that are subject to control of prohibited substances. Then we have got raw material and finished product specifications that are also discussed under this requirement, and specific requirements relating to food chain category I. Then under 2.5.2, we have got product labeling and printed materials that is applicable to food chain category. To all food chain categories, and then there has been emphasis on claims that if they are made on product label or packaging, that shall be validated. There are also additional requirements relating to category I. Then we still have 2.5.3 that talks about food defense, and it is applicable to all food chain categories. There it was just emphasis on the threat assessment, that it must be based on a defined methodology and that the potential threats shall be linked to the processes and products within the scope of the organization. Then there were also additions for the food defense plan that also relates to the threat assessment and verification procedures, as well as that the plan must cover the processes and products within the scope of the organization and the specific requirements relating to food chain category F2. 2.5.4 food fraud mitigation is also applicable to all food chain categories. That in terms of the requirements, still, it's also similar to food defense, where you are required to have a defined methodology that you base your food fraud vulnerability assessment on. So it must be clearly indicated, and also a requirement that the assessment that you have done that looks at mitigating the measures for significant vulnerabilities must cover the processes and products within the scope of the organization. There is also emphasis on the plan that, based on the output of the vulnerability assessment, specifying the mitigation measures and verification procedures, the organization shall document that food fraud mitigation plan. Then under 2.5.5, it talks about local use, and that is also applicable to food chain categories. There they have added that certificate of analysis or certificate of conformance, that is your COA or COCs, shall not have any FSSC 22000 logo or any statement or make reference to its certified status. That also is applicable where exclusions to the scope of certification apply. 2.5.6, a lot of changes here, and it relates to the management of allergens, and it's applicable to all food chain categories. There is a very comprehensive revision of this clause, where it requires that a list of all allergens that are being handled on site, including in raw materials and finished products, shall be documented. It goes on and talks about validation and verification of the control measures. It talks about the risk assessment of the allergen management to eliminate the risk or reduce cross-contamination. Talks about precautionary or warning labels. When is it that they should be used? Talks about also the training of personnel in allergen awareness, and also making sure that the organization has an allergen management plan that is reviewed annually. Then there are specific requirements that are applicable to food chain category D. Then in addition to that, we have got a section that talks about animal feed, that is for food chain category D, as said previously, where if there is an allergen that has been claimed or that could be present, then you must ensure that it's related to the legislation of the country of sale pertaining to the animal feed. But if there isn't anything, this section of the scheme requirements may be indicated as not applicable unless a claim relating to an allergen status has been made on the animal feed. Then 2.5.7 looks at environmental monitoring. It's applicable to food chain categories B3, C, I, and K. Again, a lot of revisions there, but a major one is under D, where the environmental monitoring program should be reviewed for continued effectiveness and suitability at least annually, and more often if required, if there are any changes related to products, processes, or legislation. And then they go on and include other prescriptions in terms of the revision. When is it that it should be reviewed? Then 2.5.8, a completely new additional requirement that relates to food safety and quality culture. So this is also applicable to all food chain categories, and it prescribes exactly what is it that is expected by the scheme in relation to the organization maintaining a food safety and quality culture as part of their management system, and also what is expected in terms of the objectives, which should be supported by a documented food safety and quality culture plan, where the targets and timelines must be included and also discussed in the management review. In the next slides, we are going to look at the additional requirements from 2.5.9. 2.5.9, quality control, which is applicable to all food chain categories, is a completely new requirement. So there is a very comprehensive list of things that organizations will need to comply with, including implementing and maintaining a quality of policy and quality objectives, implementing and maintaining quality parameters in line with finished product specifications for products and product groups that would be used for product release. Then it also talks about making sure that the organization undertake analysis and evaluation of the result of the quality control measures as defined under 2.5.9a Roman figure 2 and included as an input in the management review. And it also looks at quality elements as defined in this clause within the scope of that it must be included within the scope of the internal audits. It also touches on quality control procedures that looks at weight, unit, volume that should be established and implemented by the organization to ensure that it meets applicable customer and legal requirements. A big one, although it's just one subclause, but this is very important. We have seen it in other standards such as BRCGS, where people were really confused what it means. That is the line startup and changeover procedures that shall be established and implemented to ensure products, including packaging and labeling, meet applicable customer and legal requirements. So this includes having controls in place to ensure labeling and packaging from the previous run have been removed from the line. It has really nothing to do much with looking at whether the equipment is functioning. So that could be part of it, but the big thing here is ensuring that there is no cross contact between the material that have been used in the previous run with the one of the current run that should be running. Then 2.5.10 that deals with transport, storage, and warehousing is also applicable to all food chain categories. And there isn't much change, with a big exception on the subcategory D, where it deals with transport tankers if they are being used by the organization either for the transport of raw materials or final products. And this is where most of the organizations so far are struggling to really put this into action. So organizations that use tankers for transportation of their final product are required to have a documented risk-based plan to address transport tank cleaning, and shall consider potential sources of cross-contamination and appropriate control measures, including cleaning validation. It goes on, which we'll explain when we are going to be discussing this. And it also talks about the organizations that receive raw materials in tankers. Here I'm thinking about bulk milk tankers, where it comes from a dairy shed to a dairy processing facility. So here you shall ensure that as an organization in the supply agreement, as minimum, there is something that talks about product safety and preventing cross-contamination, tanker cleaning validation, restrictions linked to prior use, and applicable control measures relevant to the product being transported. Another additional requirement that has changed is 2.5 level, where we look at hazard control and measures for preventing cross-contamination, and also is applicable to all food chain categories, excluding F2. It also has a change under Clause D, where it talks about organization requiring risk assessment in place to be put in place in order to determine the need and type of foreign body detection equipment required. And if you don't have it, you must justify why don't you have it. And there must be a documented procedure in place for the management and use of equipment that is selected. 2.5.12 PRP verification food chain categories applicable to is B3, C, D, G, I, and K. Nothing much has changed here except for the introduction of B3. Then 2.513 talks about product design and development. Again, this is applicable to food chain categories B3, C, D, E, F, I, and K. Not much has changed except for Clause F, where it talks about ready to cook products. Another clause that hasn't changed is 2.5.14 that relates to the health status and is applicable to food chain category D. Then 2.5.15, it is a completely new requirement. It talks about equipment management and is applicable to all food chain categories, excluding F2. It talks about an organization having a documented purchase specification before they procure the equipment, and ensuring that the supplier provides evidence of meeting the purchase specification prior to installation. It also talks about a risk-based change management process for new equipment and or any changes to existing equipment. Then we've got a completely new clause again under 2.5.16 that deals with food loss and waste. And again, this is applicable to all food chain categories, excluding I, and it talks about a documented policy and objectives detailing the organization's strategy to reduce food loss and waste within the organization and the related supply chain, and controls in place when food is given away. Then we have got 2.5.17, a new requirement speaking to the communication requirements if the organization is found in one way or the other having problems, whether it's serious events that impact the food safety management system, legality and integrity of certification, or serious situations where the integrity of the certification is at risk. So organizations are required to communicate that to their certification body so that they can make a decision whether the certification can continue. Then we have got 2.5.18 that looks at the requirements for organization with multi-site certification. Again, that deals with food chain categories A, E, F, and G. Nothing much has changed here. It's just a few grammatical or elaboration that have been added to say that the internal audit requirements that have been specified here are in addition to clause 9.2. Another key component of FSSC 22000 is complying with your customer requirements. Before you jump in and you start your FSSC 22000 certification process, you must make sure you understand and you comply fully with your customer requirements. You must ask yourself the following questions. Have I received a request or notification from my customers requiring recognized food safety certification? If yes, is it FSSC 22000 or they've explicitly said it must be GFSI recognized, and then you can decide to choose FSSC 22000 should you want to go for FSSC. You must make a list of all your customer requirements. The customer requirements may be additional requirements pertaining to their own country's regulatory requirements. Maybe it may be something pertaining to material residue limits, maybe in food, maybe your MRLs, which are your maximum residue limits in food products. Maybe there is a certain substance that is not allowed in their country. It may also maybe relate to microbiological testing. Maybe there are certain microorganisms that you should be testing on certain intervals. It may also be maybe labeling requirements. So you must ensure that all your customers as well as your potential customers, you know exactly what their requirements are. The auditor would also be checking those requirements whether you are complying with them. You must also ask for clarity should these requirements that have been asked by your customers are unclear. And lastly, you must ensure that you keep your customers regularly updated on your progress, because that actually shows intention. It may show that you are indeed trying your utmost best to implement all the requirements that they want you to implement. So it's always helpful for you to communicate with the QA department from where you would want to sell your product, or the customer that has shown interest in your organization's products but require you to have certification. In some instances, one could just implement ISO 22000 2018 first as the first audit, and thereafter the following year may then upgrade to full FSSC 22000 certification. It's always advisable to start with ISO 22000 2018 first, just to see if you are ready for your management systems. And the benefit of that is that you have got stage 1 and stage 2 audits, which will then give you a fairly good idea where you are. Then when you go for a full FSSC 22000 audit, at least you have been exposed to auditing firstly, and also you know where your gaps are. The next step, which is a key component of FSSC 22000, is to comply with other relevant standards. So except for food safety laws and regulations, your organization may need to comply with other standards. Maybe it could be standard relating to potable water. It may be a standard relating to labeling. It may be a standard relating to microbiological requirements of food products. So you must find out which food safety standards apply to your business. For an example, the ones that I've listed above. You must then obtain copies of all the food safety standards that are relevant to your organization, because that will help you determine the limits or the guidance of how is it that those standards are supposed to be implemented. You must ensure that you read, you understand and implement the requirements of each of the food safety standards that are relevant to your organization, and while at that, you also incorporate the requirements that your customers have asked you to implement pertaining to certain food safety standards. Should you need help, you must seek professional help when you are unsure how to interpret those requirements, or also how to practically apply them within your organization. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening. That is all for today. All the best with the other lessons.